Good afternoon and welcome. We have decided to start. Some people will still be coming in, but it's great to have you here already. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon we meet here today, the people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I suppose first up, a little bit of housekeeping. The bathrooms are sort of down this hallway and then to the left, past some glass doors and then on your left again. You'll find them. In case of an emergency, which obviously we hope we are not going to experience, but please then follow the instructions given to us by the warden. And after the formal part of today, we will be serving some drinks and canapes in the room next door, although the wall will pop up by itself. So I really encourage you to stay around for that and take the opportunity to network with one another. So yeah, I am absolutely thrilled to have you all here, and it's great to see you. I want to say a special welcome to our Royal Orange members and also to the Honorary Consul of the Netherlands, Mr. Richard Mendelson. Richard, welcome. Now I'd like to start with some thank yous. First of all, to Global Victoria. The NCCA is extremely proud to be a partner of the Global Victoria Trade Alliance, and that we, together with Global Victoria, look at opportunities for Victorian businesses to expand their operations into the Netherlands, or who see the Netherlands as a gateway to Europe. I'll give you a little bit of a background what we have been doing as part of the Global Victoria Trade Alliance. So we've been organizing a series of events highlighting different areas and industries where we see or we think these opportunities for Victorian businesses lie. Our first event we did was called Doing Business with the Netherlands, and we focused there on more general issues like how do you set up a company in the Netherlands? What is the current employment climate like? We looked at supply chain issues and what legal implications are there opening up in the Netherlands. Then the second event we organized was where we partnered with some other European chambers, and we looked at the European-Australian Free Trade Agreement. And although the trade negotiations are still ongoing, they started back in 2018, and in actual fact, later this month there is another round of talks. But we have already been able to establish quite some opportunities and advantages for Victorian businesses that want to come to Europe. Then our third event, we looked at, focused in on fintech, financial technology, and more specific fintech startups, because we have recognized that as an area, again, of numerous potential. I can give an example, a Victorian company called Air Wallets, who's disrupted the financial fintech market quite a bit, and have very successfully opened their operations now in the Netherlands and other parts of Europe. And that brings us here today. So today we're looking at AgTech, agricultural technology, and the opportunities and lessons from two of the main AgTech powerhouse regions, Victoria and the Netherlands. But before we kick off, I have to make say one more thank you, and that, of course, is to KPMG. Thank you for hosting us here today and for sponsoring this event. I mean, how lucky are we to be able to see these amazing offices from such an iconic brand overlooking probably one of the best cities in the world. So thank you, KPMG. KPMG has been a very long-standing Royal Orange member of the Chamber, and we really look forward to further joint events in the coming years. So I would now like to hand the microphone to Paul O'Hagan, the Senior Manager at Global Victoria, looking after the UK, Europe, and Israel. Paul.
Thanks so much, Helene. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Paul O'Hagan, and I'm the regional lead at Global Victoria for Europe, the UK, and Israel. I'd also, on behalf of the whole of the Victorian government, I'd also like to I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to thank KPMG, Ben, for hosting us tonight in these fantastic offices. For those of you who aren't quite familiar with Global Victoria, we are the state's trade facilitation agency, and we proudly serve as a gateway for Victorian businesses to expand and succeed internationally. We have the largest footprint of any international offices in any state or territory in the country. We have 23 around the world. Our engagement with the Netherlands is headed up through our office in London under the leadership of our Trade and Investment Commissioner, Tim Dillon. And we also have a satellite office in Frankfurt, and we're expanding that office. But it's a particularly interesting time for Victoria's relationship with the Netherlands and Europe. And as Helene says, we very much look forward to the successful conclusion of negotiations for a free trade agreement. It's been very interesting to see over the past couple of weeks that not just Australia is looking to diversify its markets, but now Europe is also looking to diversify its markets. And as a result, Australia has gone higher up on the priority list for our European colleagues. And as a result of this real new interest in European markets, we're opening a brand new office in Paris next year, which will serve all of Europe, and we very much look forward to increasing our links with the Netherlands as a result. And the Netherlands plays a particularly interesting position in Europe as a gateway for Victorian companies to enter the European single market. As we all know, Victoria has enjoyed a deep and long-standing economic relationship with the Netherlands, and it's great that Richard is able to join us tonight. The Netherlands is Victoria's second largest export market in the EU after Germany, and Victoria is home to the largest Dutch-born population in Australia, which we're very proud of. Our relationship really is dynamic and it crosses a whole bunch of sectors. And what's really interesting to see is that those sectors are quite complementary on Victorian strengths and Dutch strengths. And tonight's event on agriculture and technology, we really are the powerhouse for Europe on the Dutch side, and we're the powerhouse for Australia. So I think that's enough for me. Again, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. If you do have any questions of how the Victorian government can support your businesses going abroad, or our colleagues in Invest Victoria helping you set up here, please do grab me afterwards. I'll now pass on to Rob, there you are, from the Dutch Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Growing world population, global climate challenge. Agri-technology is becoming more and more important to develop better, more sustainable, more efficient ways to feed the planet. So what you're all doing is important, and I hope you can learn something today from all these speakers. We are very excited. We believe we have an excellent lineup of speakers from all different levels of the industry. They all have a wealth of experience in their field, and I would ask you to refer to the bios that we emailed to you a couple of days ago, so I don't go into details and keep my introductions nice and brief. I would also like to ask you to keep your questions right to the end of the panel round. Our first speaker for today is an investor, Mr. Philip Keulen from Mendeley Venture Partners. He is a founding partner and the head of strategy. And Mendeley recently launched their new venture capital fund. And Philip will today talk about the Australian eco scene, undoubtedly with an investor hat on. Please welcome Philip.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Rob, thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to be here. I'm Brisbane-based myself, but I've made my way to beautiful Melbourne to come and join you here today. Today I would like to talk to you about probably some of my personal, professional journey and how that infused some of the thinking into Mandalay and our investment thesis and our activities around the fund. Actually, one fun fact: this was not by design, but I'm Dutch and Belgian myself, so it's an extra privilege to be here and invited by the Chamber of Commerce as well. So have to connect with the counterparts in Brisbane if there is any activity there. So firstly, I wanted to talk about some of my background, some of the other partners that are part of the fund. I myself have a background in bioinformatics and bioscience engineering. And early in my career, I moved to Southeast Asia, to Cambodia more specifically, to head up a firm that was focused on rice production and rice trading locally. I was a minority investor in this firm, and I led the development of that project for about 4 years. And I learned a lot of things by doing that, being completely immersed in a different culture, in a different country, in a sector that was largely new to me as well, even though there is sort of scientific background. I think every sector within agri-food is quite special and different. And so I learned a lot about, I guess, traditional business by doing that. But one of the other things I learned and I found out is that I was finding the need and seeing the need around me of entrepreneurs, founders, business owners to connect, to learn from each other, to share opportunities, to share challenges, and understanding that there wasn't necessarily always the vocabulary to do that. People were not talking about themselves as business owners or founders or entrepreneurs or whatnot. And I felt the need to bring all of that together. And that led me to start my first co-working space, which was based in Cambodia, and bringing together a community of people who are leading businesses, developing business, coming up with lots of new ideas, innovative ideas. And that was a launch pad into what we call, I guess, the startup ecosystem or entrepreneurial ecosystems, entrepreneur support, and the various programs that are available around that, from co-working spaces to incubators to accelerator programs. I got heavily involved with groups such as Techstars. I'm a global facilitator with them as well, and leading innovation projects across Asia with them. And also was at the start of, or one of the founding members in the co-working Alliance of Asia Pacific, which was right in that 2014 real grassroots wave of entrepreneurial energy and momentum coming through the region. Fast forward a few years, I landed in Australia in 2016, thinking of myself as being, I guess, a specialist in entrepreneur support organizations and I guess the support around innovative ventures and everything that goes with that. And I landed beautifully in Brisbane in a university-based incubator called Creative Enterprise Australia, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Queensland University of Technology. And I started there as the head of startup programs, which was really a role to bring together the whole narrative and programming around entrepreneur support for the university inside the context of the university and outside in the broader Brisbane and Queensland and Australian ecosystem. And it was quite a special organization because of the breadth of activity that was happening there. Everything from entrepreneurial content within curriculum, the running of a co-working space, the running of a business incubator with 30 companies on site at any moment in time, the running of 2 accelerator programs, and the management of a fund on behalf of the university. So quite a broad spectrum of activity there. 2020, come the pandemic, QUT decides to divest in its entrepreneurial support, shuts down its subsidiaries, and some of our executives decide to continue on that work within a new entity, and Mandalay is born. We attracted a 4th partner to the fund, Mr. Al Fullerton, who's quite well known within the agri-food tech ecosystem across Australia, who was already managing the Australian Food and Farming Fund, and Mandalay took over as the sub-investment manager for the Australian Food and Farming Fund. And we made 4 investments through that entity within the first year of operation. And we are currently, as Mandalay Funds Manager, or Mandalay Funds Management or Mandalay Venture Partners, raising our first fund, which is an early stage venture capital limited partnership, ESVCLP, focused on C to Series A investment into mostly Australian agri-food tech through our ecosystem and global network. Roughly, our thesis is quite broad. We're looking to invest across the entire agri-food technology spectrum, but here are some areas of interest. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about right from the get-go is we do talk about AgTech, we do talk about agri-food tech, and there's other words, but regardless, the definition in general is actually quite a broad one, and there's actually lots to talk about in terms of what do we actually mean when we talk about AgTech or agri-food tech, because is it from an innovation perspective, Horizon 1, 2, 3 type innovations, it's stuff that's already on the shelf versus things that are, that is 10 years away from now. What business models are we talking about? Is it, or are we talking about innovations that are being developed between inside large agriculture corporates versus scrappy small startups that are developing their products? Two very different things. And when we talk about AgTech, what about all the other sectors that sit in relation to that? We talk about climate tech, or we talk about fintech in relation to agriculture, and so there's all these kind of other additional sectors that play a role there as well. And so this is quite important for everyone when we're having these discussions, is to be quite mindful of what do we mean when we talk about AgTech, and what is the specific role we play as an organization within that broader ecosystem. And for us, as a small or an early stage venture capital company, we play a particular role, but by no means are we the be-all and end-all of funding within this space. In fact, we're probably a small amount of the funding that is available within the sector. But we play a particular role, and that is we fill a market gap when it comes to investing in early stage entrepreneur or founder-led organizations, call them startups, for lack of a better term, or innovative SMEs. And so that's the type of entities that we can invest in, and excludes a lot of other things, obviously. Now, two things I want to share with you before I pass it on to the next speaker is the things that really drive us at Mandalay. And that is, first of all, a deep empathy for the entrepreneurial journey or the founder journey. So we talk about our activities and our approach as being sleeves up capital, meaning we work very closely with our founders on what is one of the most important growth phases within their businesses, which is really about early stage founders going from being product focused to having to manage a business, build a company, call it from product to CEO, which is a very different thing. And we work very extensively with founders all the time through programs or through our investment process, pre, during, post investment process, on that transition, that personal and professional transition. And so that's what we call sleeves up capital. It also means that sleeves up capital for us is, we are investors. We are not farmers, but we try to be, out there in the regions, seeing what's happening, what amazing stories are happening on the ground, and what amazing inspiration there is available for us to look at potential investments. The second thing is we see ourselves as an ecosystem-minded venture capital fund. We have something that we call the Mandalay Innovation Platform, and that is that we actively seek collaboration with stakeholders across the entire ecosystem, be it the RDCs, universities, other funding partners, organizations such as multiple of you represented here that can help companies grow internationally. So various channels there. As well as obviously corporate ag and other types of stakeholders. So how do we make sure that all of these people can work together, can step out of their comfort zones, can find some kind of gray zone to have conversations that you wouldn't have within the confines of your, the boundaries of your firm. We call that, open innovation to a certain extent, but the things that are really valuable to us are programs, hubs, and other types of activities where people voluntarily step into a place where we can have conversations that are not purely transactional. So I guess that's probably it for my introduction, and you'll see that the first voice here is one of someone who's on the ground and a practitioner as an investor and as a startup support group or team, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot of great stories of people who will look at the macro scene of how these collaborations exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. I have a feeling there's a few people in the room here that may want to have a talk with you afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is from the government. It's Paul McGrath from Agriculture Victoria. And as the name already indicates, AgVic is aiming at developing and securing agriculture in the state of Victoria. Paul, in his role as Manager AgTech and Innovation, is responsible for driving all the efforts there. So please, a warm welcome for Paul McGrath.
I'll just move this down a bit. I thought when I was coming to the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, I might there might be some tall speakers, and I'd have to bring it down at some point. So let's do that. Thanks everyone for inviting me here tonight, and thanks Rob and the Chamber for the invite. As Rob said, my name's Paul McGrath. I'm the Manager of AgTech and Innovation in Agriculture Victoria. So what I'd like to do is just give you a bit of you heard an investor viewpoint. This will give you a bit more of a government sense of perspective and things on AgTech. So what I'm going to do is just give you a bit of an overview of AgVic and what it is, talk about our new strategy for agriculture in Victoria, talk about investment in on-farm AgTech adoption, and we had a strong approach initially that sort of focused more on farm. But over time, we've changed focus, and there's a creation of a new entity called the AgRIN, which is the AgTech Regional Innovation Network. And it's really about supporting the ecosystem and the different players, and trying to support companies to come through the system and scale up and export and attract investment in. So really, that's a bit of a summary of AgVic. Essentially, I sit in the policy area, and I have responsibility in terms of policies and projects in relation to AgTech, but it's a much broader organisation. There's research function, so we have researchers working on agricultural issues and AgTech issues across the state. We have smart farms across the state, and there's 5 of those, and they're in different parts of the state and focus on different commodity groups. We have biosecurity areas that manage the risks coming into Australia. So it just gives you a sense we're a kind of a broad church, and it's important because Victoria is Australia's largest producer of food and fibre products. This is our strategy for agriculture in Victoria. It was launched in 2020. It's the vision, and it's been backed up by whole of government funding support over the last couple of budget cycles, and we implement it in collaboration with industry. Here's some of the goals that we have in relation to Victorian agriculture. So we want it to be an engine for growth for the Victorian economy and attract investment and new jobs and help communities thrive. We want it to be creative and resilient and responsive. We want it to be a front runner in low emission food and fibre production. It's Australia's agriculture exports centre, as I mentioned, and we want it to be home to diverse and innovative careers. Really the key point here is that there's a number of themes that drive the actions under the strategy. The key one in terms of AgTech is modernise. For me, AgTech does 2 things. So it's really about sitting above the whole agricultural sector and sort of how do we create productivity? How do we, it's a large sector, how do we get more out of it? And how do we manage risk? So it's the benefits across the sector, but then if you look at AgTech as a vertical in itself, there's new jobs, there's new investment, there's new opportunities in AgTech as a subsector. So there's sort of 2 big ways to look at it. really, this slide's about some of our historical approach to AgTech in the state, and the state's made significant investment in on-farm adoption. We had an Internet of Things trial over numerous years, and it's just sort of coming to conclusion now. That was $12 million, and really that was about supporting farmers to overcome lack of connectivity. You need that backbone of IT support before you can adopt AgTech and the different technologies. And it was really a bit of a pilot that went across the state and 300 farms in different sectors, and really helped them implement technology, things like soil moisture probes, weather stations, monitoring of stock and those sorts of things. And then more recently, we had the Digital Agriculture Investment Scheme, or the DAIS scheme. That was about 10 million, and it allowed farmers with sort of co-funding from themselves to adopt AgTech on their farm. So that's some of the historical support. As I mentioned, AgRIN's a more recent sort of intervention, and it's one of the key programs that I lead. Really, it's about how do we get the ecosystem working together and pulling in the same direction so we can make the most out of this opportunity. In Victoria, we've got a really large agricultural sector. We've got a strong digital sector. So you would think that we would have a really strong AgTech sector. Now, it's emerging, and there's research that shows there's about 50 startups in Victoria in the AgTech space, but how do we leverage that? How do we grow them? How do we support them? And that talks to some of the goals and the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve, and really it's a $15 million commitment over the next couple of years. Here's some AgRIN initiatives that we've launched in the past. So a key thing is the AgTech Entrepreneurs Program. Really, that's about pre-accelerators. So how do you get startups coming through the system? You give them support, you give them accelerator support. We started to get feedback that our accelerators were great, but we could improve the quality of the candidates coming through. If people got support when they've got that glimmer in the eye of an idea, and then but they need support to get to that minimal viable product and to turn it into start turning it into a business. So we invested funding and invested in Farmers to Founders, Rocket Seeder and SproutX, and some representatives from those accelerators and pre-accelerator groups are here tonight. And it's really to give that support for startups coming through the system. Another fund support that we provided was for SVG Ventures to come to Australia. Really large and significant AgTech investor. And really that's about, again, providing accelerator support, but also venture capital funding, and really trying to catalyse the ecosystem here in Victoria and provide linkages to the global AgTech market. Finally, I guess in terms of AgTech and innovation, this is one of the ways that we view it in AgVic. Really, there's a pipeline of companies coming through the system, and they really go from that glimmer of an idea to they need help to design, to prototype, to get proof of concept, to get out there and start testing it, and then start scaling and commercialising and exporting. So what we want to do is have a range of interventions that help support companies to go through this pipeline as fast as they can, and we've invested in pre-accelerator support, but one of the things we're considering is what further support we can provide, and obviously another layer to this is exports and markets such as Holland, but also investment that comes in, and Holland, I mean, large agricultural producer, really innovative in the AgTech space. States such as Victoria really need to be looking to models such as the Netherlands to try and bring their learnings in and catalyse our own system as well. So thanks very much, everyone. That's an overview from AgVic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And we'll see Philip and Paul back in the panel later today as well. And it sounds like Victoria is the right state to be for AgTech support. But it's now time to move to the other side of the world and look at the Netherlands. Our next speaker is Jeroen Wouters from Food Valley NL. Based in Wageningen. You may know Wageningen as the home of the famous Dutch University for Agriculture. Food Valley NL is an independent international organization dedicated to global transition to a global sustainable food system. And Jeroen is the lead for Global Connections and will share his experience on the Dutch ecosystem with us. Jeroen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Clear.
We are very happy to have you on board. I'll just pass over to you. And good morning to you. It's still a bit early in Holland.
In Australia.
But I'll leave it up to you to start your presentation at your own leisure.
Yeah, wonderful. And a great pleasure to be attending digitally in this format. But yeah, a pleasure to be here with you. And I hope things are loud and clear. And yeah, happy to share with you some insights from the perspective of Food Valley NL, with the Dutch perspective to it. I brought along some slides and I figured, well, maybe I give you sort of a waterfall with quite some information. So I will share also briefly a PowerPoint presentation. And I anticipate this will be visible right now. It is, right? And now here also you see a nice set of dots, and that is represented in the Food Valley logo. And what the fun thing is, if you look very closely to those dots, you see that they're all differently shaped. And this is the uniqueness of a lot of the actors in our ecosystem, as we call, to be involved in food innovation and by that shaping the future of food together. Now, briefly, my name is Jeroen Wouters. I'm lead Global Connections at Food Valley and also Innovation Manager in Sports and Nutrition, a bit more specific topic. But a pleasure also to facilitate in the interaction with Australia today, but also earlier. And it was a pleasure also to have the delegation of KPMG visiting, well, in June this year. At that time, there was quite some debate, I can tell you, on the Dutch agri-food sector and how to deal with that and how to go about it in future things. Still ongoing, of course, but of course also, yeah, a good constructive approach recently, especially this last week. But hopefully that will, yeah, also develop the ag-food development in the Netherlands and specifically also a role for innovation in that. Now, then I would like to start with a few words on the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a very active agri-food chain. You will probably be aware of that, a large exporter, but also large corporates present in all steps of this value chain, which is much more dynamic than I represent over here, by the way. But also the fun thing, a lot of smaller companies involved and a lot of new arising companies, startups or small SMEs, as was referred to by the earlier speaker as well. And that is where we thrive upon. Now, and a bit about the Netherlands. It's a small country, you know, tight, a lot of people, but also a strong agriculture production. And the fun thing is there's also a lot of knowledge and agri-food technology information represented also by a lot of scientists involved, both acting at academia, in institutes, but also in industry. And we, as Food Valley, thrive on bringing together all those type of players and actors in that field and, yeah, facilitate the collaboration. That is also, I have to say, supported by quite a history in the Netherlands on a lot of in-house R&D, so strong technical willingness to develop, but also a lot of collaboration. And public-private partnership is maybe a key term in that, but also oftentimes supported by government to support and stimulate the interaction between companies and universities. And various top sectors also have been defined, and it's good to know that horticulture and agri-food are specifically in the Netherlands. Now, a key aspect also to our being is, of course, the Wageningen University and Research Center. You see here nicely represented the campus, which hosts a lot of the researchers, students, but also companies. And that is a key factor. And we are, for example, in an assembly building positioned through and in the middle of a lot of startups and young entrepreneurs, but also the head R&D office of Unilever or Friesland Campina or Upfield as larger companies. Now, Food Valley was already highlighted a little bit, a platform in which we support innovation, but also the transition in the food system. A pretty long term ambition, but also working on tangible activities. And that is represented in this schematic. It's a lot of text, maybe. There's various innovation fields. I will come back to that in a moment, but also innovation support is sort of the underlier of our activities. International is there. A lot of activities on entrepreneurship throughout the whole chain of development. Focus on talent and bringing in talent to the agri-food sector, but also stimulating interaction between companies. Shared facilities as a key aspect, and also ecosystem intelligence, so knowing what the trends are. And we thrive on doing that with a large community of companies with different sizes, different nationalities, so very global interaction. And especially the interaction between large corporates and smaller SMEs or startups is crucial. Next to that, also, of course, a lot of suppliers in various ways, but strongly hinted toward knowledge, and also investors around us. So that it brings us into a nice setting with agenda setting, inspiration by others, and also an international aspect. Now, in the innovation fields, we see some terminology that I heard come by also earlier this morning. Protein shift, a key topic for us, balance between animal and plant-based proteins. Circular agri-food, that's where a lot of the AgTech is clustered in, but also food and health, which also hosts a lot of digital and technology type of information. Now, I briefly touch upon those, and then the waterfall is there. So protein shift, as I said, in that balance between animal and plant-based proteins, we see a lot of meat analogs, meat replacers coming to the market, and how to develop that. Also, that primary production is oriented towards that is a key development there for our activities. A large group of companies there, again, logos, but I think the nice thing is to show you some of the people that bring out these new solutions or concepts, and basically are the driving forces we like to stimulate. And this can go from very tech, novel protein sources, to a bit more of a process of cultivating soybean in the Netherlands or quinoa in the Netherlands, which was historically not the case, of course. Now, then the topic of food and health. Key topic is personalized nutrition for us in that. And also here we say, hey, there's an ecosystem which is much wider than the food system, also involving, for example, insurance companies or consumer organizations, and bringing our health perspective to it. And that is facilitated in this key topic. Digitalization, as I said, key, but food concept, and also defining a healthy food environment. Now, one side topic to that, also public-private partnership, is on sports and nutrition. I'm personally involved in that. I won't go into detail with all the partners here, but it brings together practice and academia and companies all alike. And the fun thing also that in this sector, also alternative proteins pop up quite a bit. So now we're looking into, hey, what does that mean for athletes that are very prone on muscle development, for example.
Check what the food is and
then we have the last topic I would like to address is circular agri-food. Of course, also the topic of today in quite a program. So new crops in development, new materials, but also a circularity, upcycling of materials, and new processing methods. So quite a bit focused on AgTech technology, so cultivation, water management, you name it. And here we see that we don't do this alone, not at all. We have a lot of international relations and all over the world, but we also have a lot of projects that involved in that internationalization and international development. You see quite some European Union oriented activities, and of course the EU is supportive in that, but we also have various aspects that are at a worldwide scale, for example, the interaction with World Economic Forum also. Now, and I think this gives you maybe some of the hints and the highlights of the activities of Food Valley. Challenging time, interesting times, but innovation will be key in upcoming developments. And with that, I would like to say, get connected and be involved. It's a great pleasure to share that with you today.
Dankjewel, Jeroen. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And I was very impressed with the sheer number of logos on your slides. A very active area indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, if any of you have any questions for Jeroen, please circle them by us, and we'll make sure that Jeroen will get them and you will get your answer. Our next speaker is an Australian logo, right on the ground here, an operator, and my ideal example of a startup, a scientist who's turned into an entrepreneur. I'd like to invite Mr. Daniel Palacci to the stand. He is the managing director and founder of Rubens Technologies Australia, based here in Melbourne. Daniel.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Well, you've heard a lot of perspectives, so now it's the time of an up-and-coming startup. I'll probably, I was commenting before, this is a little bit different from my usual audience of farmers in a shed. So my slides are perhaps a little bit too technical and aimed at that. I'll try to give a high-level overview and perhaps a little bit of the story of our journey. I personally don't come from I don't come from a farming background, so there was a lot of learning for me to take in this journey. So obviously coming from research, and well, the first things I'm generally asked when I talking not to farmers but to others is, why do we need a fruit quality testing? That's what we do. And well, the fruit quality, the fruit we see usually is the tip of the iceberg. We see all those fruit that looks nice and all the same color, nicely stacked in a supermarket shelf. What we don't see is what's behind it, all the fruit that gets wasted in the process of getting to the shelves. And obviously there is waste, there is loss of incomes for the growers, and that's what we are trying to ameliorate. Now, supermarket typically have very stringent specification, very good quality assurance processes. That means fruit is regularly tested. So why do we need to test fruit? Well, it's actually needed to make sure that it gets on the shelf in the conditions that we would like to see. And well, the process is time-consuming for the growers. Now, when I started, I obviously, and I apologize here for the technicality of the slides, but when I started, I sort of startup 101 means, getting out of the building, go to the growers, go to the farmers, learn what they need. In this, it was very good for us actually to be connected with Agriculture Victoria and the smart farms that they run, because that helped us actually to broker a little bit that connection. And so we could go out in the smart farm, test things in their environment, and then bring it to the growers and ask, if you had a technology that would help you scanning fruit non-destructively, what would you do with it? And this is the things that we learned. And so fruit scanning means a lot of waste, a lot of chopping fruits in the way of measuring, say, sugar content, maturity, and so on. This is a process that is not at all digitized, and obviously it's very slow, and it takes a lot of time to the growers right at the moment where they have no time. So that is during harvest usually. So how can we speed up that? And that was our journey in developing this technology. So Rubens technology is something that is non-destructive, so you can just point at the fruit and get a reading, and then we'll tell you something about, say, how sweet is that fruit, how soft is that fruit, what is the maturity level, and so on. And it's happening in real time, so it doesn't have to wait, so the farmers can get very quick decision and say, where do I send the crew tomorrow, considering the weather and whatnot. And obviously now the data is already digitized, and so it can be shared with the supply chain, but also the farmers will have something that they can send the fruit to the pack shed, and then they will know something about the quality, which at the moment not often they don't have. And so they have something to stand on when they want to negotiate also the price of that fruit with the packing shed and so on. Okay, so how do we do that? We have a combination of a scanner and machine learning. Okay, the scanner is based on a spectroscopy, so here is where my science degree eventually came to some use. And so we scan the fruit with a bunch of different sensors. We capture the spectrum of the light, and from that we train a machine learning model to predict fruit quality indicators. Then again here, very key was to actually get out and understand what the farmers want. The first things that we start giving to them were things that made no sense for them. And eventually we learned, let's try and just replace whatever it is that the industry is already measuring. Whatever it is that makes sense for them, for the supply chain, for the supermarket. So that's where we went in. Now I will touch on it. We can do much more than that, but we found that the best way to actually start having conversation and start selling some of those devices and some of our subscription was through essentially replacing the existing testing metrics with our metrics. So our machine learning model is trained to actually give them whatever the industry is already measuring now, but in a much faster way. The results are returned to the user directly in the paddock, in the field, and they will make quick decision, and then they will have this data available on a dashboard for sharing with the supply chain. So a couple of use cases. So how do we, what our customers are doing with this? One is picking stone fruit. Now there are growers that start to realize, stone fruit growers here in Victoria start to realize that the export market is much more profitable, and they would like to get their fruit to Asia, especially at key moments, for instance, Chinese New Year. Now, to do that, you have to pick stone fruit exactly at the right time. If you pick too early, they won't ripen properly. If you pick too late, they will be too soft. When they get, they don't travel well. So, and that's a very short window of time. So we've been working with growers in the Goulburn Valley to actually find out the sweet spot of picking a time where you can guarantee that the fruit can travel 3 or 4 weeks and gets a destination in the right conditions. Another use case is the apple storage. Now you might know that apples is stored for many months usually at the time. So the last peak is probably around May or June, and then the fruit is stored. Now storage is controlled atmosphere, so low oxygen, high CO2. The room is sealed, so it is not very economical to actually open the room and check the state of the fruit from time to time. So we have now customers in Badalo having a few apples close to the door, and in a pothole they can take a few apples, scan them, put them back, and they will know if the apples are ripening too quickly. It's time to open those rooms and sell those apples quickly. Okay, so this obviously I've said we can do many more things of that. A few of them are there, but perhaps for us here in Victoria, it was really good to partner, as I said, with AgVic. And again, personally for me, was good to actually be new to the industry. Was very good to actually get out in the smart farms and being able to, with them already, to sort of get feedback in a more friendly environment, perhaps with scientists, and that as a first step to actually get out and start talking to the grower. Now, obviously, in startup, you will always looking for customer feedback. So that, in a sense, AgTech is good for that because if you are in need of unfiltered feedback, farmers are certainly the ones that provide that. So there was a lot of learning there. And the overarching goal of our technology is trying to actually get out there, having more value that is captured in the communities at the farming level, and possibly even expanding beyond fruit and in other food sectors. Again, thanks for the invitation to here to the chamber, and so thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was a very interesting product, and we wish you all the best with the continued growth of your company.